Okay, we are live, so we can go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us. Just as a reminder, the session is being recorded, and we'll ask everyone to keep their cameras and mics off during the panel. But if you have questions or comments for our authors, please drop those in the chat, either in the Zoom platform or in the FeedLoop platform. We have someone monitoring both of those places. So we're going to have our two guests of honor for this final panel tell us a little bit about themselves as writers before we get started. Who'd like to start?
Hello, hi, my name is Trung Nguyen. I have made one long-form graphic narrative work so far. It's called The Magic Fish. It's right here. Folks have been reminding me to pull up my book because I keep forgetting. I've been kind of making sort of shorter comics, collaborating with other people, including Alex de Campi, among some other writers, to kind of, you know, get my feet wet in making comics. And I'm starting to also write my own material now. So I'm in kind of this new kind of green space in terms of making my own work. And I'm very excited to kind of be here and chatting about writing graphic novels with Alex.
It's also Trung's chicken's second birthday?
It is, yes. My chickens turned 2 years old today.
He has 3 adorable chickens, and one of the great joys of following Trung on social media are chicken updates. Yeah, my name's Alex de Campi. I live in New York City. I write across prose novels, graphic novels, and TV and film, though by far my largest body of work is graphic novels. My latest book is The Backups, which is a fun YA story about 3 girls who end up as the backing singers on a big pop stars big summer tour, and get into all sorts of shenanigans on that. I've also written a ton of other genres. I have books somewhere. From, you know, like horror, sorry for sweary title. Actually, I'm not sorry, but I'm sorry for any, you know, for the YA audience. True War Stories, which is an anthology of soldier stories that I edited, and Maddie, which was a sci-fi book with my friend Duncan. And those just came out in the past year. This is why I've been like nonstop. I have a 10-year-old daughter, a cat named Ruffles, and a dog named Sarge. And if you see something large and cream and white climb on the bed behind me, that would be Sarge.
I love that your cat's name is Ruffles.
She was my mom's cat, and we when my mom went into a care home, we took her in, and so my mom named her Ruffles, and she's great. She's a little 7-pound Bengal mix, and she is entirely the boss of the whole house.
That's so cute. So we're going to start with some questions that we kind of generated ahead of time, but when chat questions come up through either of the platforms, we'll try and prioritize those, since those are kind of happening now. You probably get this one a lot. Which one do you think comes first, the image or the text?
The text. I think it's just my bias, but like I have discovered that I think of myself as a visual person, and so a lot of the story beats and a lot of the elements that come forth in terms of like the particulars of moments that happen kind of pop out of my head in terms of pictures. But if you want to tell a story, like the script has to come first. You can't edit down from nothing. You have to have something to work from, and that's kind of the anchor around which all of the kind of visual narrative elements come through for me.
So does that mean that sometimes you get the pictures first, but then you need the story to put them to?
Sometimes, but like in most cases, if I'm being organized and intentional, I will have something written first.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
I often like the very seed of a story for me is often a visual, but it's just like one image. I have a YA book I'm slowly working on that started with a visual of a boy, a teenage boy sitting on a jungle gym in the Midwest where it's like completely flat, like he's in Kansas, and looking out at the sunset and just really just not wanting to be there. And that is the whole basis of a story that I'm working on. But once it goes from like, here's a picture in my head, I can't, like, I have to then write a script. Unlike Trung, I can draw a little bit, but not well enough to draw a whole graphic novel. So I work with people who are far more talented visually than I am. And I write a script and find collaborators, and we do a pitch together. And then they draw the script in various stages, and we can go into that more if people want. And then it comes back, the art comes back to me, and I put the word balloons and the sound effects and all the letters on top of it. And that's how we make a book. But it's, the script is also not the last say though. Like, I mean, Trung and I worked together on a short story, which I still really love. And I do what's called a complete script. Sometimes scripting is very loose, like pages 11 to 14, fight scene, and that's all you get. And then it's up to the artist to do it. And I always thought that's kind of unfair because, like, you know, if Trung's having a bad day and, like, I mean, if he's not feeling well and he gets up and he's like, oh, you know, I have to think this whole thing up now. Whereas what I'd rather do for me to feel like I've done my job for him, I feel like I have to panel out that entire fight scene and any dialogue that's there. And then I hand it to him and say, Trung, or, you know, whoever I'm working with artistically, if this doesn't work for you, just feel free to do whatever you feel like. But I feel like the script is like is a foundation that you can only improve from in the drawing.
Yeah, and that's sort of become like my default, like this is my ideal way to work with someone, because I do like a lot of direction, but I also like a lot of flexibility, because it takes away some of the onus of like making sure that everything is sort of plotted and kind of, what's the term for it? Kind
Scripted?
of like, yeah, that everything is sort of like scripted, and the characters are all sort of like in the right places. Like the compositions of the panels and what goes on, like I don't have to worry about that too much because I know where everything is supposed to be. So that's always helpful. Oh, there's Sarge.
There's Sarge. Hi, Sarge. So a follow-up question for you, Alex. How do you think your writing or your writing process differs depending on whether you know you're writing for prose versus a graphic outlet?
There's completely different formats. The graphic novel format is, you know, page 1, 5 panels, panel 1, panel description, character A, dialogue, character B, dialogue, sound effect, panel 2, boof, and then a prose. So a graphic novel script is very much a letter, a private letter between artist and writer, or between artist and him and themselves if they're writing their own work. It's never meant to be seen by the reader. The reader only sees the finished product, whereas a prose novel manuscript eventually is exactly what is seen by the reader once it's copy edited and rewritten and produced. So that's the way to think about it. So often well, it's important in graphic novel scripts to spoil the plot. So it is literally the Chekhov's gun thing, you know. Trung, the character's carrying a red suitcase. I need it to be there, but not be very noticeable. Like, let's not make a big deal about it, but it's really important in chapter 3. So then, like, you know, Trung's free to draw the room as he feels like, but he knows that here's this one detail that we need to include.
I see. So it's like your, the words you're writing down are the skeleton of the story, as well as some predictions about how to set the picture, set the stage up.
Yeah, and I'm usually suggesting how many panels are on the page, because again, I need to give. I'm just going to keep saying Trung like it's a conversation between the two of us.
Yeah, let's
totally fine.
We'll do that. Yeah, that works for me.
You know, like I need to make sure I'm delivering a baseline of visual pacing to Trung. I mean, he can more than do it himself, and, you know, almost any artist worth their salt can do that. But I need to know that, like, everything, you know, I've got not too much dialogue on the page, not too little, you know, the right number of panels, the right variation in number of panels as you go through the story. Because, you know, if you have a lot of panels on a page, like a 9-panel grid, then it slows the reader down, and you can't have a lot of big visual moments because it's just talking heads, or there's just not much real estate. And 9-panel grids can be incredibly effective as a storytelling technique, and they're almost more effective when you script them on a right-hand page. Because the thing about a comic book, and I totally didn't save a place for this, is when a comic book is unlike a prose novel. It actually matters what's on the left page and what's on the right page, because the reader physically turns the page, or, you know, like, or swipes if they're on a phone or something, and then voila, there's a big reveal. A large dog in this case, a very big reveal. And so you are trying to slow the reader down on that right-hand page just before you turn to a splash page, because then there's this moment of like, oh, I didn't expect that, you know, and it's usually a cliffhanger moment, like a wow moment, you know, or just something where you want the reader just to have a moment to really enjoy the visual element of the story, and you can really go into more detail and have something pretty there. So it's an extremely, it's completely different from prose writing, and it was, you know, it's very hard to do both, to both be good at graphic novel scripting and at prose writing. And it took me a long time to get into prose after graphic novel writing for a bunch of reasons.
Okay, that makes sense. So similar question, but a little bit of a difference there for you, Trung. How your process of creating, you know, visual elements or of drawing or being an artist, I'll say, is different if you're going along with someone's story versus creating it for yourself. What that process is like for you.
Well, I mean, I think my process is actually very similar, because I think that like when I'm writing and when I'm drawing, I'm in two completely separate headspaces. And so it's not the same track. I still have to reconcile a lot of like, well, what did I mean when I wrote this down earlier? Like, how am I going to like visually tell this portion of the writing of the story? And it's really just a matter of like, am I providing enough like visual context for the things that need to go on the page for me? And so kind of the process that Alex described, she's very good at making sure that all of the right props are on the page. And so those are all the things that will like, these are the important visual elements, these need to be included, but I can like kind of fill in the rest of the bric-a-brac and the like kind of the rest of the texture of the page. And so that can sort of be folded in so that it can be information that the reader can sort of access and notice, but it won't, you know, need to jump out immediately. But that's something that I need to know in the script. It'll be spoiled for me. But if you're, you know, if you're doing prose writing, that's not something that you can make explicit to the reader. It becomes a part of like that plausible deniability becomes a part of the reading experience. And so I don't get that experience as an artist of a script. I would have to be able, like, I would have to know all of the things that are happening in order to effectively support the script and, you know, tell an effective story that way.
Thank you. Alex, you okay?
Yeah, I'm sitting, well, I'm fun, messing around in my Dropbox.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
To find a example of a one-page comic script, which I have just stuck in the chat. Okay. I don't know if readers can get that. Oh, it's quite large. I'm sorry, it's 39 meg because it's from a file. It's a final, but it's part of the background of Dracmofo, and it shows you a simple 4-page comic script, a 4-panel comic strip, so you get an idea of the formatting.
Thank you so much for showing us that.
Oh, that's such a fun graphic novel. Erica Henderson's work lends itself so well to like vampire, like noir. So yeah. it was so good. I loved it. I loved that book.
That's a great endorsement. Let's see what else I have in my chat. I have talk about your background as an artist.
Okay. So I did not go to art school. And so for many years, I felt like I needed to play a lot of catch up, but I eventually realized as I sort of matured into like doing the work that I do, that really the thing that matters is my portfolio and like how well I can work with my collaborators, my editors, my other writers. And so I sort of like kind of let go of that sort of thing because everyone has a particular lilt to the way that they like to tell stories and make images, and everyone has like a particular voice anyway. And so trying to do things the right way was kind of me wasting a lot of time, but also, you know, kind of shoring up a lot of my fundamental skills. So it was kind of both helpful, but also I was anxious about all of the wrong things. I started off wanting to do curatorial work. I come at, you know, visual arts from an art history perspective. It wasn't something that I had intended to do as a career, literally at all. Like I'm the first child in a family of immigrants, so I was trying really hard to be practical about things. And I was going on sort of a museum track. I studied art history. I interned at the Minnesota Center for Book Arts. And the big one that I wanted to do was to kind of do dramaturgy. And so I interned at the Minnesota Historical Society in the summer of 2011. And I was doing history research for the history players. And so the, you know, the folks who would dress up as people from history so that they can perform for the kids when they come in. And I was really excited to study Harriet Bishop, who was the first school teacher in Minnesota. She was a teetotaler and pretty belligerent racist, but she did a lot of very interesting things in terms of organizing things in the Midwest. But the government shut down because of a budgetary disagreement between the Republicans and Democrats that year. And so I lost my internship because of that. I was considered non-essential personnel. And so I was like, oh, okay, what else do I do with my life? And so I started drawing and putting comics on the internet. So the way that I got into this industry is very particular to me, and I can never really like tell people, like give people really strong advice, because I kind of came in through a very non-traditional means, I think. So my background kind of comes from being this egghead who likes to do a lot of research, and then sort of just incidentally shoring up my artistic skills by putting things on the internet, and then connecting with people who had storytelling sensibilities that I admired and working with them.
Thank you for that.
It's really funny because I'm also an egghead who majored in art history and loves to do research. So maybe there's a reason we work well together.
Yes,
I think a lot.
I always forget about that.
In my sci-fi thing, I'm like I literally was like, let's do this splash page after this Caravaggio painting, and I can kind of feel my artist head like eye rolling from Spain from here. So I think you can get into, like, anybody can be a writer, anybody can be an artist, anybody can get into this. You don't have to go to art school. If art school, like the should I go to art school debate is like what's more important, script or art in a comic book? Like, it's just not, it's a debate that's not worth having because it's so incredibly personal. Like, it might, like, art school might be a wonderful experience for you, and if you think it is, you should absolutely go. If you can't go to art school for whatever reason, that's also fine. You can complete, like, there's every major city has life drawing classes, art classes. We have a ton in New York City. There are great online resources. Like, you can be as good as you want to be. Like, all the resources are there for you to learn on your own if that is a track that works for you as a person. So I highly encourage everybody to try and to keep trying, because it doesn't happen overnight. It, in fact, takes about 5 years longer than you think it will. And then you publish your first book and everybody's like, oh, and so suddenly you're not wildly famous or rich overnight, and then you realize you have to keep publishing books.
It's not that one thing isn't going to plummet you.
No, it never does. It never does. But hopefully by then you like doing it so much, you're kind of fine with it. Someone asked about where creators could go looking to get into graphic novel writing. Google's your friend. You can Google, I mean, there's just a ton of resources out there for people interested in writing graphic novels. People offer courses. There are a few books, but I'm not like super into, a couple of the books are written by people who have never really published, which I always find an interesting technique. Dudes love to tell other people what to do. But yeah, you can Google graphic novel script. There are a ton out there. You can get Alan Moore's scripts, but like you should get several different scripts, because every writer is different and formats differently and works differently. And you eventually have to find your own voice. I would not suggest trying to write like Alan Moore. He's very inspirational, but please try to write like yourself and draw like yourself. And on Twitter, artists are always posting their pencils. They're always posting their rough work. Artists love to post like live cams of them sketching or inking. You can see a ton of that, and people are very approachable. Like, if you're like kind of busting in there like the Kool-Aid man demanding stuff, or like expecting a ton of their time, people are probably not going to be as responsive. But if you just follow people that you like and whose work you like, you're probably going to get a lot of links to interesting things and people and techniques. And folks are always happy to answer, generally always happy to answer respectful questions on the internet if they have time.
Amazing. Yeah, the other question that's related to that I think you guys have been answering is, what advice would you give to aspiring graphic novelists and artists? Do you have anything to add to that idea, Trung?
Not really. I think Alex had it pretty much covered. Like the one thing that I wish that I had known going in is that there's no one right way to do everything. And I'm someone who really likes rules. I like a little bit of formalism. And then I realized that like that being precious about that kind of prevents you from doing your best work. So you kind of just have to go in and be messy and make work that you might not necessarily be proud of later, but like that'll kind of help build your foundation creatively so that you can have something to springboard yourself off into like better things and things that you feel more connected to like as a creator. So yeah, and like I really tried my best to find like the correct way to write a comic strip or a comic script when I was doing the Magic Fish, and I kept asking people and they would send me like, people were very gracious. They sent me like, here's a sample of like what a script looks like for me, because I didn't even know what one looked like. And I was like, does it look a little bit like screenwriting? Is it anything like prose writing at all? Like, are there parallels here and there? And everyone has a completely different way to do it. And so it's sort of just about negotiating like, what information do you have that is important and how do you best digest it? And if you can figure out a way to work with yourself that way and collaborate with another person that way, it just requires a lot of constant communication and renegotiating, but it's a really nice and fun dynamic thing that changes. So there's no one right way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage people to start small. You know, it's finishing things is a habit. So if you set yourself up for your like, you want to write a 60 comic issue epic or like a 300-page graphic novel, I would not suggest you begin with that. I would suggest you begin with 8 pages. Maybe it's a scene from your graphic novel. Maybe it's a, you know, try to do some comic strips, like just do something short that you can script and then draw, or find somebody to draw, and you're not asking for a massive imposition of their time, because, you know, a page of comic takes, although artists are differing speeds, a page of comic takes about a day to draw. So if you're like, I've got a 300-page graphic novel, well, congratulations, that's 300 working days of somebody's life, at least. Plus, you know, any adjustments that have to be made, plus possibly somebody externally coloring it and lettering it. So you're asking for a lot when you may not be necessarily mature enough yet as a writer or an artist to be able to finish the task you've taken on, versus making a mini comic that you can sell at conventions or give to your friends or give out as a sample. That's a little complete thing. So I would strongly encourage that.
Yeah, you guys are both making me think of something that I talk with teens about quite a bit, and actually young adults as well, who are really interested or passionate in something like writing or art or dance. And so everything they want to do, or they only want to be involved in things that are very clearly, I want to take this kind of dance class, or I only want to be drawing, or I only want to be painting. And we talk about skills that you develop with a wider range of experiences. And I wonder if you guys have ideas about kind of where you might have developed the skills that make you a good writer, a good illustrator, outside of just writing and illustrating.
For me, it's like the other skills you need are project management, collaboration. So every time your teacher assigns you group work, even if you hate the person you're working with, like this is a really super important life skill. Because again, a page of graphic novel takes a day. And often like the pay for graphic novels, even if you get a good advance from your publisher, is really not a lot of money. And it's not enough to really exist on comfortably while you're doing this incredibly manual, detailed work. So, you know, you have to be very, like, you have to make people want to work with you. You know, laying aside, like assuming you're working on your writing skills and your visual storytelling skills, you know, being a clear communicator, being a generous and kind collaborator, understanding business, understanding contracts, because a lot of contracts in the comic book industry are not good. And your first couple deals in the business will always be bad, unfortunately. Like, you know, often in the early, like you take a bad deal just to get published and then do better from there, but please don't keep taking bad deals if you can help it. So, you know, I strongly recommend people learn to manage money, understand budgets, understand basic contract terms. I mean, there's a lot, you know, There's a whole lot. Oh, and one thing
Yeah,
I would also
we end up having to do everything.
Yeah, the other thing
sorry,
I
please
suggest
continue.
for writers is you learn basic. I directed a bunch of music videos. I've done a lot of directing work, so this came naturally to me from other work I'd done. But learn basic cinematography shorthand, like get a cinematography 101, like 100 shots that always work or something like that. That tells you like what's a medium shot, what's a wide shot, what's a close-up, when do you use a close-up, when do you use an over-the-shoulder shot, when like what's a high angle shot, you know. So learn why we have this over 100-year-old language of cinematography, of visual storytelling. And comics and film are not the same. You know, there's so much you can do in comics that you can't do in film and vice versa. And you should not try to be like back-ending your screenplay into a graphic novel. That will make nobody happy. But these visual terms exist, and I find them very useful to describe to Trung, for example, what I see on the page, and then he can choose to agree or disagree with my choices. And if he disagrees with my choices, then he's free to go and do his thing. But at least he understands what I'm trying to communicate. I have the vocabulary for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. And like, because there are so many different things that you kind of have to, like, if you're a writer, if you're an artist and you're working within comics and graphic novels, oftentimes you're working within a very decentralized sort of like, there's no like union right now, like as we know of it for like comic artists. And so you kind of have to be adept at learning how to learn. Like that's something that you kind of never, like you will always use those kind of learning skills. And so if you can do research, if you can like, if you can, I don't know, like take in information and like contextualize it for yourself and kind of make sure that on the receiving end of information, you can kind of suss out the right questions to ask if things are unclear. Like learning how to learn really is the most important core thing for me as I've been going forward.
Yeah, it sounds like part of another underlying theme that you guys are kind of talking about is this idea of humility too, you know, be willing to learn and to not feel too, somebody earlier in another panel talked about being precious about your idea or holding your idea too precious and not being willing to collaborate and hear other people's thoughts are really great skills to have. Especially Alex, you were talking about, you have to be able to communicate and collaborate and people need to want to work with you.
Yeah. I can't make graphic novels by myself. I don't have the requisite skills. And if I want to be super precious about an idea, I'll just write a prose novel and then I can do that. But then my editor will still come back and say, well, you know, here are the weak spots. Can you work on those? So I'm going to have to take critique at some point. So I think, you know, accepting and understanding critique is very important as well. And something that a lot of younger creators find difficult, because I mean, you've just finished a thing, like you're very, very proud of the thing. And honestly, you just want attention and validation. It's what we all want all the time. It's all right. And then someone in a position of power or a gatekeeper critiques it. And first you have to figure out what's a positive, helpful critique, and then what is, as occasionally happens, someone trying to establish power or just being a bully. Usually it's positive critique. And you can tell because what they'll do is they'll say a few nice things and then they'll say something about like, here's how I think this, you know, here's how I think this could be made better. And it's phrased very positively. And bullying critique is just meant to just, you know, just make you feel bad and make the other person feel good about themselves. And that is a person that you no longer need in your life. Even if they are a gatekeeper, they are keeping the wrong gate. You do not want to go through that gate. Therein lies Mordor.
That's super important, I think, especially for a lot of younger creators too, because oftentimes a negative critique from someone like kind of unbidden, unsolicited is not aimed at like making their work better. I know that people like are like, oh, I'm just offering you constructive criticism. Why aren't you taking this gracefully? And it's more to discourage you from continuing to make work. Yeah, exactly. And then like when you have professional relationships with people that you trust, like your editor's feedback, your collaborator's feedback, like those are really, really golden. They are experts. They know what they expect from you. And they know that you understand like that this is an adjustment that they want to make for the benefit of this project that you're both working on. So you kind of know, you have to know who to trust and whose opinions you want to hold close to your heart and whose opinions you can just say like, oh, like, maybe you're trying to accomplish something different than what I want. So maybe I don't need to listen to you exactly.
People on
the relationship matters.
Yeah, people on social media, like and this is especially something that I think, you know, Trung probably experiences more as a person of color. I experience occasionally as a woman, is people, you know, there are people out there who don't like your success, and their way of expressing it is by saying nasty things about your work. And that has absolutely zero to do with you and everything to do with them. And just because you're available on social media and they can at you, it does not mean you need to reply to them. I just quietly mute them and let them shout into the void, and it gives me a great deal of satisfaction.
That is also my strategy.
Well, and I think it sometimes takes a little bit of effort too for some folks to recognize when someone is doing that with the air of helpfulness, you know, so it's easy to recognize when somebody's being blatantly nasty. When someone hedges their nastiness in helpfulness,
oh
it's
yes, the
sometimes
concern
harder.
Concern,
yeah, concern trolls, sea lioners, all of them.
Yeah.
Mute, exactly. Blocked, especially on Twitter. We were talking about that earlier. Like the block hand has to be really strong on Twitter because it can go downhill so quickly on that platform.
And also, you know, there are no, like, especially for comics, I mean, we're such a nickel and dime industry. There are no gatekeepers, and they're really, even though when people try to be gatekeepers, they don't exist, because there are so many ways to get your work out there. Now, you may have a set, like, you know, and you're going, Kenya, you were going back to like people who, students who want to just do dance or just do modern or just do like one particular form of art. You know, you may just want to work for Marvel or DC, and then that is one career path. And like, I bless you and wish you all the success in that. And I hope you find great joy in writing those characters, but also someone else might not want to do that at all. So, you know, just because you don't feel like your art would fit somewhere, or you aren't really interested in a place, like, it doesn't mean, or that place doesn't seem interested in you. That doesn't mean you can't have a career. That doesn't mean you can't get your work out there. I mean, webtoons, like, more people, like, you know, Laura Olympus has like what, like as
I love Laura Olympus.
Like, oh my God, like, it alone has been read by more people than every Marvel and DC comic book this year put together. You know, Tapas is big. You can just put, you know, short work on Tumblr. I follow a ton of Instagram comic artists who do strips on Instagram. I follow, like, I can't remember who it is who posts the really, like, cute and sad bird art on Twitter. I
know the one you mean.
Yeah, I love it. Like, gets me every time. You know, Dinosaur, which is basically just completely calling out anybody with depression and ADHD, like, everything. So
that planet one with the aliens with the blue heads.
Yeah, the alien one. So there's like you know, you just post your work on Twitter. It's fine. Post your work on Instagram. Like, nobody can keep you out. Like, just do it.
So we do have a question in the chat. Are the characters that you illustrate always accurate to what you picture in your mind, or do they develop as you continue to draw? And there's certainly a parallel there when you're writing a character or writing things too. Does it always come out the way that you intend, or does it develop as you are going along with it?
Oh, way more the latter in both writing and drawing. Because like sometimes I'll write a character and then something about them will like be revealed to me later. I'm like, I did not intend for this to happen, but this character just, I guess, introduced a new part of themselves to me, and I have to kind of like roll with that. And it's a kind of very organic process of just continuing to build on what it is that I've made before. So usually a character doesn't end up being anything like I envision them. And even when I'm drawing, I think a lot of times, like, there's a lot of crossover between folks who like work in video games and animation and comics, and so there are like visual habits that artists will have. Like, some artists, like if you're in animation, like oftentimes I find that people who animate like to make character turnover sheets, and they're like very particular about like the ways that all of their characters look. But some other comic artists are not so much that way, and they'll like kind of use the previous page that they drew the character on to like be the reference point, and then the character slowly sort of transitions and is off model for the rest of it, but it's still communicable to an audience. And so those are just two different ways of working that I don't really find any fault with, but I sort of definitely more lean towards the latter, where I will start on something and it might not be consistent throughout the entire way, but as long as it's legible to the reader, I'm not very precious about that at all.
I have a visual demonstration of what it looks like between the thing in your head and the thing you create.
Oh, excellent.
The thing in your head, and this is the thing you create. Okay? And you know what? It's going to be all right. You know, it's never like you have the image of this book in your head and you know what it's going to look like and it's going to be gorgeous and wonderful and funny and like, and then this leaden thing ends up on the page and it's never quite as like, it always could be better. Like I always say, a work of art is never finished, it's only abandoned. I could have kept my next book, Heartbreak Incorporated. My editor was like, no, you need, like, you can stop rewriting it now, it's fine. I'm like, no. You will like it will never be as good as you think it is. And I think this is actually really, really important for young artists who are trying to get something done is you have to, I think the note I give artists the most is do less. And this comes in a bunch of different ways, one of which is plan your wow moments. If you have a page of comics with 5 panels, and everyone is like a dazzling angle and like really innovative posing and stuff like that, it's just going to be very noisy in your head, and your eye won't know where to look. If you have 4 panels, which are fairly bread and butter, low on background, you know, like a lot of like some good close-ups, and then a really cool panel, everyone's gonna like, it's more harmonious to read. And then you really take in the really cool panel because it's got room to breathe around it. You know, that's what double page spreads are for. It's the wow moment. You're like, you know, in the book I'm pitching, we've got 7 pages of like, you know, fairly like fun dialogue and escalating stakes. And then you open to this absolutely beautiful forest spread where you just go, wow. And you plan that. And that's where the artists I'm working with, Ted and Ro, spent the most time. And they were absolutely right to do that. And then like some of the other panels didn't have backgrounds. It's just a dog because we're gonna have a lot of dialogue. So like, why would they draw a background when I'm just gonna fill it with words? So, you know, it's really important that you learn to budget your time as an artist because in your career, both writing and drawing, you will have to learn to draw that page in a day. You will have to say, okay, well, I'm not going to make this panel as intricate, but I'm going to make this next page with the splash page super intricate, and I'm going to spend more of my time on that than on this dialogue page. So, you know, you have to learn to know when to move on, and that's only something you get from drawing and writing a lot.
Yeah, and especially with storytelling, like not everything has to be depictive because you are making a text when you're drawing a comic book. And so you're engaging with the reader's imagination. If you draw a background here and then you kind of establish a background and then you draw some panels later on with no background, the reader will be able to pick up on the fact that it's taking place in the same space. And so they have a visual reference for it already. And so you do have to kind of engage in a dialogue with someone who is like reading the book so that they can sort of imagine things and get a little bit more invested in your work. And you can do that by doing less.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about prioritizing the time and effort in a way that makes sense given what it will look like or what you're trying to do.
And play to your strengths as well. Like, you know, don't struggle with doing something you're bad at. If you're bad at drawing horses, either go sketch some horses if you really want to learn how to draw horses, or just don't have any horses. Like if you're bad at drawing like angles, like if you like high angle is hard for you, low angles, don't draw them. Like just draw square on. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've read like tons of Naoki Urasawa comics where it's an incredible story, mostly told in close-ups and reaction shots. Like you don't have to make your own life hard. Play to your strengths.
Mm-hmm. Seems like a great metaphor, great life metaphor.
Yeah.
Don't make your own life hard. Let's see if I have any other questions, because you guys have really touched on most of these as you've been talking. Because I already know that answer. Mm-hmm. You already gave some great advice to aspiring graphic novelists and artists. And then this question, I think, Alex, you talked a little bit about this in the writing process, but this question is more specific about editing. How is the editing process for a graphic novel different from other works?
This is actually important in terms of collaborations as well. I mean, I always hand the artist my script and say, if there's anything you don't like or you want change, I hand them the outline first, and then which is just, the way a comic script moves along for me is I write my outline first, and that's what happens in every chapter. And then I do my breakdowns, and that tells me what happens on every page. And again, because there is the page turn and you have odd page and even page, you need to know what happens on each page so you can make sure your double page spread actually comes across on a double page spread and not on like a right-hand page and then a left-hand page, because that doesn't work. You can't have it start on an odd numbered page, it has to start on an even numbered page. And then I do the actual script, which tells me what happens panel by panel on that page. And you know, while the breakdowns will have some temp dialogue in it, the script is really like describing each panel and placing the dialogue within that panel. And then that goes to my collaborator and my editor, and everybody gives me notes. And then once we're clear to start drawing, Trung would do the stage was either called thumbnails, layouts, or pencils. It's the roughing out of the page, and you see what angles he's chosen. You know, it's not finished art. It's not as time consuming as finished art, but it lets you know exactly what's going to happen on the page. And that is when most of the notes about what is being drawn should happen, because that is when it's easiest to change. And one of the most important parts of collaboration is being respectful of your collaborator's time and effort. You know, because he then inks it and then he puts color on it. And then by the time the colors come on, the only notes should be about the colors. Like, oh, I think that, you know, I think that background is too yellow. Can we try it blue like it is in the other panels? Oh, you know, I think there's, you know, I think wasn't her dress red in the previous chapter, you know, can we try this green or something? It shouldn't be, oh, well, can we redraw this sequence, or can we do something different here?
Let's change the whole setting.
Well, because then you have to go all the way back. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to educate people on when to change. And I think that's often, if artists are working with new or young writers, they should absolutely like read them the riot act about, here is my work process. I expect all of your corrections at this stage. And then if the writer bats back, oh, these look fine, like I would interrogate them, because, oh, these look fine means I haven't looked at it and compared it to my script.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and the penciling stage should ideally be when all of those visual changes happen too. And there will be adjustments to the script, because like in a comic book, like the images are the text, but the text part, you kind of have to like rework that and imagine them as a part of the image. They take up a certain amount of space. And so compositionally, that's when I tend to like to change things, or like ask if I can move around text if it makes more sense here, or if we can say something more concisely in the text. So it's a lot of adjustments that are made during the thumbnailing and penciling stage.
Yeah, I would strongly suggest young artists for their first couple of scripts actually temp in the lettering. And also you have to ask whether you're doing the lettering, because often young writers will and expect you to do the lettering as well. And it's okay if lettering is a skill you don't want to develop. There are many, many professional letterers who are good at it. But you can download free comic book fonts from Blambot and from Comicraft, just as a starter, and you know, usually it's usually 8 points with like a 9-point leading if it's uppercase, lowercase. And I would suggest you use uppercase, lowercase, because it's easier for reluctant readers. It's easier for readers with some visual processing issues or dyslexia. And it looks less like shouting, because obviously all caps is like caps lock now for this generation. So I would suggest putting, you know, just sketching the word balloons in, because you're teaching yourself how much room to leave. And that also might give you ammunition to feedback to the writer you're working with, even if that writer is yourself, thinking, wow, there's way too much dialogue on this page.
Yeah.
You know, they can't fight and read the entire Constitution on this page.
Yeah. Yeah, those sound like hard lessons up there if you're learning them every time.
Yeah. And then when I go back, because I'm one of the few writers that actually letters their own work, it's usually outsourced to a third party. I do a lot of changing to my dialogue. I get rid of stuff. Sometimes I add things. I add sound effects where I want to draw the eye. You know, sometimes the art will remove the need for a character to say something, and sometimes the art won't quite get there and you need to add the character saying something, so you're smoothing the transition. And sometimes you move balloons around between panels. It's, you know, there's a whole, you know, you should always read over the dialogue once the art is in. Well, you should be looking at the dialogue and the art as it comes in to make sure it all works. But like, you should definitely do a final lettering pass and looking at the art, thinking, do I need this? Or, you know, do I need this line of dialogue? Do I need more dialogue? Do I need to move this dialogue?
So we have no more time, but in the last 1 minute, do you have a favorite character in a book that you didn't write?
I read mostly nonfiction, so I like lots of I have lots of favorite characters, but they're usually like people from the mob who've done particularly silly things. I want to draw like I want to do like a short series of like real life mob comics, because there's some stuff that just needs to be out there.
That would be really cool.
And someone else asked about inspiring places I go to inspire my writing illustrations. I mean, I often take a break by running or walking. I love to sit in the dog park, so there's a lot of getting out of my house and just moving around. I also love to go to old movies, and I can do that a lot in New York City, and especially now that pandemic, I'm vaccinated. Yay! Get vaccinated, people. Science. I like to sit in a dark room and have beautiful visuals and a beautiful story like projected on the screen, and then I get a lot of inspiration and ideas from that.
Yeah, and I don't have a favorite character in a book at all, because I like the character themselves don't matter to me outside of the context of a story. If they're not doing something interesting, I don't feel attached to them. They don't need to exist in my brain. And as far as like special places to inspire my writing and illustrations, I think like literally just stepping outside every once in a while. And Alex talked about this a little bit in an earlier panel, but like I have figured out earlier that like I don't like to consume the same things that I like to make. And so I tend to like go and consume things that I would never think to make, because sometimes that'll inform the way that I do the things that I like to do. And I always find that to be kind of a fun process.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that goes along with this idea of having variable experiences and doing a lot of different things, trying a lot of different things. That's great. Well, thank you guys so much for spending some time with us today. That 45 minutes flew by. And I think that's our last panel, but folks should, of course, check out the merch store, check out the bookstore, which has books by all of our attending authors, along with signed book plates. So I have a number of things in my basket right now to go check out, and check out our sponsors. And thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having us. This was great.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
Good. You guys have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.